Well, don't just stand there.
God's a busy man.
Welcome, Gothamites, to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City. And now, somewhere along the Alpha Quadrant, it's Dr. Drea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Hello, Brian. Happy Batman Day.
Happy Batman Day. No better way to celebrate Batman than to talk about Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. This was first time you had ever seen Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. Am I correct?
Yes, I think I've seen, I don't know, maybe it was, I'm sure I've caught snippets. I'm sure it's aired on cable. I'm sure, because some of the, like the visage of the godlike person, that figure, I've seen that.
Well, I mean, it's a very familiar looking figure.
I can't imagine where, like, yeah, well, I've seen,
it's
I have seen the face of God. No, I've seen the Trek, that scene or that, that
image.
Yeah, it's a very recognizable Trek image. I'll be honest, the whole movie. So what I knew about this movie is that it was the faith or God movie, and I kept waiting for that scene where that godlike hand reaches out and like grabs the Enterprise, and that never happened.
Turns out you're thinking of an episode of the 66 series called Who Mourns for Adonis. And I will admit, there are similarities to this movie, particularly as we get to the final act. There are similarities in that episode from the 66 series. The Enterprise goes to a planet and a large god hand grabs the ship. It's the hand of Apollo, and Apollo, the god that we all know from folklore, mythology, is real. And is not actually a god, but is a supreme alien being who has been stranded on a planet and laments the fact that he's no longer being worshipped. And so he forces the crew of the Enterprise to stay where they are and become his new followers. And he stops them dead in their tracks, literally by a large green hand coming up and grabbing the saucer section of the Enterprise. That is not what happens in this movie.
That sounds better.
Now, we've joked about this, and of course, Star Trek V is an odd-numbered movie and therefore must be one of the bad ones. It should go as no surprise that this movie failed miserably at the box office. It was riding a pretty successful wave of Star Trek movies that had been doing well. In fact, Star Trek IV was the most popular of the franchise to this point. And this movie did not do well at all. I think it came in at a little over 40-something million worldwide by the end, which is pale in comparison to the movies before it. But I will say this, because you and I literally just watched it. It's still not as bad as some people want it to be. I don't rank it highly in my series of movies.
It's just not. It's a weird. It's a small story. It's such a small story
for such huge ambition.
Right, exactly.
Because
it has
story.
This big idea, but it's a small story. It's very contained.
Yeah.
It's I don't want to say it's predictable, but it's not very complicated.
Yeah.
It kind of just is what it is. What I appreciated about it was its intention. Again, two things. Its intention to tell us a little bit more about our main characters and what drives them and who they are as people and who they are emotionally. And that's obviously interesting to me.
Yeah.
But the second part of this is that it does deepen our curiosity around what does make us who we are. We're also reflecting on the importance of this faith, but also the emotional components of our identities and how important that is to us. Each of the main characters, Kirk actually kind of gets a pass, which we'll talk about, but each of the main characters is asked to explore their fears and their anxieties and what they carry with them. And so there's some depth to this movie. It's not superficial. It doesn't feel flimsy. It has some good beats to it. It has some good moments.
I've always said that I couldn't wait to get to this movie because I feel like it was prime material for someone like you, someone who is going to analyze the movie and its psychological themes, this idea of what makes us who we are, the pain that we carry with us, the trauma, the good things, and all of that. Just that's within us. It does not tread lightly upon that subject. I mean,
and it makes the mattering of the so-called villain kind of small.
Right.
In that, of course, like most Trek movies, there is this catastrophic potential.
Yeah.
And here we end up realizing we've opened Pandora's box. It sounded like I said Pandorix. Pandorix box is something else.
I mean, it's Star Trek. It could be Pandorix. We don't know.
Sounds like something Q would introduce. Pandora's box. And I have to say, each time we see one of these films, I get more and more appreciative of Kirk.
Tell me more about that.
Well, Jim Kirk is not a character I like or that I have liked. He just seems he's always seemed full of ego and kind of always want to be in the center and not very thoughtful. And I'm wrong. Like, this is another film. I believe that the through line has always been about Spock. And maybe Kirk is the character we're meant to
see
relate
Spock's
right,
through line through.
I don't feel that way because I relate to Spock more. But
yes.
I do wonder if Kirk is our, like, we're in allyship, we're in connection to Kirk. Kirk is meant to be the person we maybe we're following the most, we relate to the most.
It is funny that you say that your proxy is Spock, because I'm going to play this clip here. I don't think that there is a moment, at least not that I can think of recently, that exemplifies more the connection between you and Spock. Let's take a listen.
Captain.
Spock, we're on leave. You can call me Jim.
Jim.
Yes, Spock?
Life is not a dream.
Go to sleep, Spock.
Oh, God. Well, let me first say, my first thought was, why are they out there?
Yeah.
I didn't quite understand.
Well,
on the campground.
But Bones says, he's like, come on out, get some relaxation. But I'm super stressed out watching everything that's happening right now as James Kirk is ascending, free climbing.
Okay,
El Cap before El Cap had ever been free climbed, but Spock makes the point that apparently it's been free climbed enough times that Kirk is not in, that the record for free climbing El Cap is not in jeopardy of having been broken today with Kirk. The thing I had to suspend my belief the most in this film was not the deity at the end, wasn't space travel. It was a Shatner free soloing up El Cap. I can't. Yeah.
I just couldn't see this as believable.
But Drea, there were close-ups of him. You saw him. He was right there. He was hugging that mountain. He was enveloping the mountain. He was making love.
This
to the mountain.
this is a character. So let me try to put aside my assumptions about I'm going to be kind here, the physical
state of
William Shatner's body
Okay.
at the time that he filmed this.
Yeah.
To free solo or even to climb with ropes a mountain like that is an intense. I don't even want to put a number to it, like 1% of athletes, 2% of I don't know. This is the Tom Cruise thing, right?
Let me
and my point here. So I'm going to put that aside.
Okay,
My point
yeah.
here is that can the character do this?
Mm-hmm.
And I have never seen Jim Kirk in the holodeck or whatever, or their version of that. Like
they don't have a holodeck.
Wherever
That's a TNG.
I know wherever their version of that, like training. Like building muscles, like this free soloing requires.
Not to mention the
such a
fact that he
special
spends
technique.
most of his time in space, where his muscles may be atrophying with every minute. Except they do have
That's fine.
They do have gravity, but
And I'm saying he can be squishy. Like that's not my problem. My problem is you go on vacation. So the premise of the beginning of like the first part of this movie is that they're on vacation. They're on leave,
shore leave,
and so they choose.
Earth.
They choose Earth, which is familiar to Jim, but it's also one that they take together. So they decide as a group to vacation together.
and by a
It's
group,
like colleagues going on
by a group
vacation.
we mean Kirk, McCoy, and Spock are all together, but also somewhere in the same forest is Chekhov and Sulu. They're lost together, but clearly not part of the same group, because the other three don't really seem to know or care where the other two are. They're all by themselves,
Yeah.
and we don't see two empty sleeping bags that night. So apparently 5 of them have all decided to go camping for their shore leave on Earth. And Uhura has opted out of shore leave.
She's taking a little bit of her own time away.
Yeah, she there's a heavy implication here that now she and Scotty have a romance. There's a thing going on between them.
They're on like a romantic staycation.
Yeah, because he has to stay to fix all the things that have not been properly installed or ready to work on the new Enterprise A, which was given to them at the end of Star Trek IV. And clearly Kirk broke the ship, because Scotty makes a jab where he says, let's see what she's got. And we saw what she has. So apparently the ship was probably in decent working order, but then Kirk put her through her paces, and it was too much to handle. And now Scotty is fixing the ship.
It's not like one engine or one part. It's like T to B. It's in disrepair.
Yeah.
So going back to the free climbing, I'm gonna go ahead. I'm moving past that, because my understanding of that feat is that Kirk is looking at this as a challenge.
Yeah.
He's looking at it, and he tells Spock, and there is that scene where he does fall. So he's like 2/3 almost.
But it's kind of Spock's fault. I mean, Spock
yeah.
distracts him with his anti-gravity jet boots, and starts talking to him while he was making his way up the mountain, pretty easily. And I will say this in defense of his athleticism. Kirk's always been an athletic guy, dating back to the 66 series. Now, yeah, he's got some pudge on him. He's getting older, like we all do, but we're now talking about the 23rd century. We're talking about feats much greater than LCAP have been conquered as humans grow and as everyone evolves. It's possible that LCAP's just not that much of a... Think about all the other planets and all the other things they've done. I'm guessing there are LCAPs on other planets that are far greater of a challenge than this one at this point. So I'm going to let him have that.
I don't know. I'm just commenting on the physics of it.
Sure.
Like, can you hold up your body on 2 fingers? Is that...
No, but I'm not in the 23rd century, and I've not done other things Kirk has done on other planets.
Okay, so maybe it's assumed that this is not new for him. Whenever he's on shore leave, whenever he's not where we can see him, he's actually training. He has hands-on experience. This isn't novel for him. He's experienced. So he falls, and Spock saves him at the very last moment.
Inches from the ground.
And they have this exchange. Later, we learn that Kirk, while it's not as if Kirk is fearless, it's almost as if he has enough belief in himself and confidence. And I'd even say, I don't want to say a willingness to die, but a willingness to risk.
So I've got a piece of audio here, and I think it's the conversation that you're talking about.
Okay.
Let's take a listen, and you tell me what you think.
You know, you two could drive a man to drink.
Me? What did I do?
What did you do? You really piss me off, Jim. Human life is far too precious to risk on crazy stunts. Maybe it didn't cross that macho mind of yours, but you should have been killed when you fell off that mountain.
It crossed my mind.
And
even as I fell, I knew I wouldn't die.
oh, I thought he was the only one who's immortal.
Oh, no, it isn't that. I knew I wouldn't die because the 2 of you were with me.
I do not understand.
I've always known I'll die alone.
That's the conversation you're talking about, Drea? This underlying knowledge that he's going to be okay because he wasn't alone?
Well, it sounds as though he doesn't think he's invincible. He's not saying he's invincible.
Right.
He seems to have this deep fear that when it's time for him to go, he will be alone. It's a very sad idea that he holds, and I'm not sure where he got this idea. I'm wondering what I missed.
Well, there are conversations that he's had where he makes it clear that men like him can't have families. And so those around him are going to die off or go about their own business. They're going to go elsewhere. And eventually he will be without a mate, a partner. He will be without friends. And eventually he will go into the void alone.
Well, he chose the mountain. He chooses the mountain.
The mountain. That mountain.
Right. And it's a very honest and sad thought. It's something he carries with him.
Yeah.
And yet, I'm also saying it's not as if there's outright recklessness about him, but there is a willing to get close to death. There's a willing to there's a willingness to risk.
Yeah. No more than anyone else who's ever gone free climbing on a mountain like El Cap or any other.
And that's the reality. It's like the psychology of somebody who's willing to free climb. It's not a neglect. It's not a sense of ignorance. It's not a sense of they don't know they absolutely know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They have there's clear-headedness about that.
Spock even says, Captain, I don't think you understand the gravity of your situation. And Kirk's immediate response is, on the contrary, gravity is foremost on my mind. Like, he understands that he could fall and die.
He's fully committed to this challenge, knowing that there's a chance he doesn't make it through. And there's an acceptance of that.
We've all seen Free Solo, the documentary, where he comes right out and says, Yeah, it's not really a question of if it'll happen. It's more of a question of when will it happen? Will I be able to retire, or am I just going to fall off a mountain one day and that'll be the end of me? And like so many friends before him who have perished in that way, I think Kirk's got that same mentality where if it's not El Cap, something else is going to take him. And God knows he has embraced or he has been in the face of death more times than he probably cares to admit, certainly within these last few movies, because, in Star Trek II, he openly admits that he's never faced death. He's only cheated it when he,
Right.
defeats the Kobayashi Maru and all these other things. It's not until Spock dies that he feels like he has faced death. And I think that that's also the trigger for thoughts like, I'm going to die alone, is, I've now lost one of my dearest friends. It's very possible that when I go, and you look at DeForest Kelley, who plays McCoy, he is older than Kirk. If everything goes according to lifespans, McCoy's going to go before Kirk does.
Well, will he? Because he makes fewer risks. So,
Right.
so the juxtaposition, which I really actually like, is that Bones is firmly on the ground,
Yeah.
with
Binoculars.
looking up and cursing him and feeling all these feelings of anxiousness and uncertainty and being on edge. And that's also, it's this moment where you're either climbing the mountain or you're on the ground, wrestling
Even
with
more
fears.
stressed out because you're watching
Right.
someone do something
Right.
incredibly
And you could
dangerous.
argue that who's having fun here? Who's
Right.
the one who's experiencing exhilaration and wonder?
Yeah.
And that's the boldness of this series, or that's the boldness of this storytelling, is you're meant to go to the edge. You're meant to see and experience things that challenge you and that make you feel that wonder.
And I think that this is something that is foreshadowing later events.
For sure.
This idea to boldly go where no man has gone before, which is a plaque we see on the captain's wheel, the steering wheel in the ready room of the Enterprise. But I want to go back to something you said a moment ago about how you get more of an appreciation for Kirk with each movie. And I don't think it's any shock to learn that this movie steers very heavily in the direction of Kirk, probably because Shatner co-created the story and directed Star Trek V, the Final Frontier. And I it's like, of course he's going to focus on the spotlight, or the spotlight on his character. But
I mean, he was Tom Cruising before Tom Cruise was Tom Cruising.
was he though?
Well, no, I mean,
Are you asking how those scenes?
I don't look. I know
I will-
Shatner wasn't climbing the side of that
I
mountain.
will say they did shoot scenes at El Cap. They did have a climber climbing with ropes. In fact, in some shots, especially because we're watching it on 4K UHD, you can actually see the tiny ropes that are kind of hidden by, distance and quality of film that they're shooting on. But you can see that there is a climber, and in the scenes where you're right up on him, the close-ups of him, it is a fiberglass mountain that they have built with the actual scenery in the background. So they're on location. It's not like that's
wow.
green screen or anything like that. They are on location at Yosemite, and they have built a platform for him to climb on. And apparently he spent weeks learning how to climb on this wooden and fiberglass structure to make it look convincing and all that. There's some pretty great behind the scenes photos of Spock on a platform next to him, and they're pretty high up off the ground, and you've just got the mountains in the background, looking at them. But
and let's talk about. So we have these two different experiences of this challenge. I mentioned Bones being on the ground.
yeah.
Kirk being the climber, and Spock is basically
Observing.
he obviously has the special anti-gravity boots. What are
Yeah,
you calling those?
the little jet boots.
The jet boots.
Yeah.
So he has those, and he just, his participation is, you're right, it's sort of as someone observing and not.
It's
really
like he's delivering a message. He just goes up to him real quick and is like, just so you know, your time is real crappy.
Yeah, it's very matter of fact. And of course, he does the right thing and he saves his friend. He does not hesitate to notice when he's in trouble. But again, it's these very different perspectives, very different needs, very, very different ways to spend this elective activity during their vacation.
Setting up the use of the jet boots
Oh
later
yeah,
as
it's
well.
going to pay off later.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the origin of this movie, actually. We know that Leonard Nimoy directed Star Treks 3 and 4, which were both pretty successful, 4 especially. And during Star Trek 4, there was actually a period of time in pre-production and the writing process where they had to contemplate how to make the movie without Kirk because Shatner was holding out for money. And during that process, that negotiation process, and in fact, a little earlier, Nimoy and Shatner had both basically developed most favored nations clauses in their contracts. So if one of them got a raise, the other one got the exact same. Well, it was understood that this meant because Nimoy gets to direct a movie, Shatner also gets to direct a movie. So before they had even shot Star Trek 4, Shatner knew that Star Trek 5 would be his opportunity to make the movie. So he had been thinking long and hard about what kind of story he wanted to tell. He knew that he didn't want it to be as funny as Star Trek 4, much to the chagrin of Paramount, who wanted it to feel more like that in tone, just because of how successful it was. But instead, he wanted it to be insightful and he wanted it to focus on the human experience and faith and all of that. And so he basically came up with this idea. Controversially, it's believed that he may have cribbed the idea from an earlier version of the Star Trek The Motion Picture script that Roddenberry himself had written called The God Thing. And he wanted to explore many of the same things that they explore in this film and got pretty bitter that Shatner then took all of those ideas and put them into this script. Harve Bennett, who had produced 2, 3, and 4, no longer wanted to come back. He basically said that he felt like he had done it. He wanted to do other things, and he didn't really feel like he was necessarily part of the Star Trek family. So it was kind of one of those like, yeah, I'm just going to duck out. You know, you guys have had your success. I helped with whatever I could, but Shatner convinced him to come back and eventually gave him this story idea. Harve Bennett, to his credit, basically the original story was going to be sort of focused on the idea of an evangelist because Shatner had become invested in this idea of evangelists, televangelists, con men who use faith to get money or riches or
like
power
grifters.
for themselves. Grifters, cult leaders.
Cult leaders.
They
Okay.
want followers, they want the fame, they want the prestige, they want the money, they want the power. And he was just like, but these are obvious shysters, and yet people willingly give everything to them out of this faith.
Yeah.
And the idea was that Spock, McCoy, and Uhura were going to get sort of indoctrinated by this evangelist. And Kirk, being Kirk, was going to basically go and save them from this cult leader, just as in the third act, the cult leader takes them away to what turns out to be hell and reveals himself to not be God, but in fact be the devil. And because the devil exists, it was going to be affirmation that God must also exist as well. And there was going to be this ambitious fight between angels and demons for the souls of these characters. And Shatner in the final shooting script won that argument a little bit. There was going to be 6 demons, but they weren't demons. They were going to be rock monsters. And the budget constraints required them to only have 1 rock monster. And there is
Like
footage
from the Neverending Story, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, like they comes out of the side of the rock of the mountains there on Shakari, and he was going to fight this sort of volcanic rock monster, glowing eyes. There is footage of this rock monster, and it's as comical as you would expect it to be. But luckily, the idea got revamped, and instead of focusing on following a god that turned out to be a false god, we now are following Sybok, a Vulcan who turns out to be Spock's biological half-brother. He's his father Sarek's son, presumably from a previous marriage. And then but the interesting thing about Sybok is that, and this goes sort of to the thoughts you've been having about Vulcans over the past few movies, and you've been asking, like, how limited are they in their emotions, and do they actually have them, and can they embrace them? Sybok is an example of a shunned Vulcan who went full on and embraced his passions and his emotions of his culture. And instead of repressing them, you can see he's a fully fleshed out, like he's basically a human with pointed ears.
Well, I don't know that he's basically a human.
Well, he has the same
his
joys
his
and the
emotion,
fears
his
and
emotional capacities, his expressions, his ability to notice emotional capacities in others. His emotional intelligence is very much like the average human. There's additional pathologies going on with him that drive him to collect other people, to recruit them, to go on this faith mission to find a
pilgrimage.
Yeah.
The idea is they're going to Shakari, which is believed to be Eden or heaven, or, you know, in other cultures there would be other things, but it's this idea that there he will not only meet God, but will be given the secret of life, essentially, the knowledge that has been withheld from all living beings.
He will achieve enlightenment,
correct,
by having a face-to-face meeting with this deity
in nirvana. Like he wants to do
and the
that.
reality is, I think, as I understand it, it's a planet. So like it's a planet in the middle of the galaxy,
in the dead center of the galaxy,
and no one's been there because there's this great barrier that, you know, ships and other aliens, humans, they haven't been able to get through. So it has this mystery to it. Yeah. And it sounds as though across cultures, it doesn't sound like this is the only Vulcans aren't the only beings who believe that at the center of the galaxy is this nirvana, is this haven.
I don't think anyone has nailed it down to the center of the galaxy. I think it's this idea that this place exists, but we don't know where. And over time, he has calculated that it's what's behind the Great Barrier at the center of the galaxy. And so it must be, that's where Shakari is. And with such great faith, he collects a band of people, an army essentially. But what's interesting is the army isn't designed to like take over the world. It's not designed to give him power. He's basically trying to free these people by giving them the same knowledge he is going to acquire in Nirvana at Shakari. By the way, there's a funny story behind why it's called Shakari.
That you're not going to say?
You know what? I'll go ahead and tell you now.
Just tell us.
You know who they originally approached to play Sybok?
No.
Say the name of the planet slowly.
Shakira.
No, but you're getting the right idea of what the planet's name is, an homage to the actor they wanted to play Sybok. Shakari.
Sean Connery.
Yes.
You're kidding.
No.
Sean Connery.
The only reason, apparently, that he was unable to do it is because he was busy shooting.
Oh my gosh, that Planet movie. Don't tell me it was that one. Where
That
he's off on
Planet
that
movie?
weird planet and it's really violent.
Outland. No,
Yeah.
no, this is a later. He was making Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade
Oh, okay.
and couldn't do it. So, but
he made a good choice.
But they named the planet Shakari as an homage to him. And it's funny because when Sybok removes the hood for the first time, you can see it. Like you can see that, they kind of had concept art for Sean Connery with his beard and his receding hairline going back and all of that. Like you could see where he could be Sybok. But yeah, so
and can I just on the note of Sybok?
Yeah.
Sybok claims that to be truly, it sounds as though Sybok isn't rejecting his Vulcan ancestry or heritage. In fact, he's embracing it. He's saying that the ancestors were deeply emotional. The ancestors knew how to, in fact, like authenticate and realize their identities, their truest potential, their own personal actualization through an emotional channel.
Yeah.
Like that was my understanding. I think there's something he says, it's either him or someone else about him. The key to self-knowledge isn't logic. The key to self-knowledge is emotion. Mm-hmm. And, nothing is an absolute. Like I would never say that's just true in its own context without understanding how there's just a lot of layers to that. You of course need logic. You need logic to make sense of your emotions.
Yeah.
There's no emotional understanding, interpretation, expression, sharing of that without your logic.
You're not only are you not wrong, Spock affirms what you're saying later in the film.
Spock and I are bros.
Spock is
and I get it.
Spock is, after having gone through death, Spock is the perfect representation, I believe, of what that being would be, because he is both logic and emotion.
Right.
And in fact, we should explain how Sybok is getting his followers. So Sybok is going to people who are clearly in need of relief, emotional relief and even psychological relief. Like they're pained people, and he is offering to help carry their burden, to remove the pain from them using whatever Vulcan means he is. But he's essentially just talking to them, and he is showing them their pain so that they can face their fears and those traumatic events. This would be, I would not, I don't want to like jump out of my lane, but to me, the sessions we see with McCoy and Spock are very much therapy sessions.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. We need to break that down, because this guy who is making this pilgrimage, there is this, I don't want to call it a pathological narcissism, but there's enough ego there for him to believe that he has the answer.
He's a prophet.
Yeah.
He believes, because he does say that God has sent him images, visions, that God is speaking to him and telling him where to come find him. And so, spoiler alert, at the end of the film, when we find out that there is a godlike deity, but that godlike deity is very clearly an imprisoned alien on this planet that is looking...
Oh, that was clear? I was not clear on what the heck was
Well, he comes right out and says, I've been imprisoned here for lifetime, whatever. Like, it seems like he's all by himself, sort of locked into this planet and does not have a way off, which is why he wants a starship. He needs a starship that he can bind with and physically leave the barrier.
That's his escape.
So now you realize that the Great Barrier isn't keeping people out, it's keeping him in.
Okay, so Sybok.
Yeah, so yeah.
Sybok holds enough authority, puts enough authority on his sense of self, believing that he can go around and recruit others into his system of beliefs. And how I see him is a bit like a cult leader.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because what I believe he's doing, if we can kind of break down what he's doing, he's basically making an emotional connection with, maybe you can play like one of the clips where he's like, could even be the first guy he comes across on Nimbus 3.
Yeah, I've actually got a couple of them. I've got the one on Nimbus 3, which is the first time we meet him. And I can go ahead and play that one because A, it's the shortest, and B, it is the most mysterious because he just talks to this man. But here we go. Well, let's take a listen.
Your pain runs deep.
What do you know of my pain?
Let us explore it together. Each man hides a secret pain. It must be exposed and reckoned with. It must be dragged from the darkness and forced into the light. Share your pain. Share your pain with me. And gain strength from the sharing.
Where did you get this power?
The power was within you.
So what's going on, some of this is actually not very supernatural, not very religious. Like some of this is very reasonable.
Is it good therapy? Would you say that he's doing a good job?
First of all, in many of these instances, there isn't consent. Like the other person, if you think about the people that he's recruiting and brainwashing, it's an extreme word of this, but let's say he's brainwashing people. He's doing this on the ship. Those people did not ask for that. They were not asking to be enlightened. They were not asking to expose their fears and their deep emotions. He came across them and forced them or coerced them to do it. So that's a part of this formula. Some of this is very reasonable or makes sense from human to human. Like if you happen to know, and I think this is generally true, it's true, all of us do carry some sense of a core fear. Could be an anxiety, could be an uncertainty, could be something unresolved, could be a history of trauma. But there's something somewhat unreconciled, something dark, something that brings on negative emotions, whatever that might be. He is a bit of a predator because he knows this to be true and he accesses that out of people. So the part that I'm saying is kind of, I don't know, the part that doesn't surprise me, the part that makes practical sense is that he has emotional intelligence. He's able to draw this out of someone. He's able to surprise them, to have this veil, to have this sort of like, oh, let me reveal that I have these powers. Yeah. When in reality, it's like, well, no, you're just saying what is actually true. And the part that is more of the shyster part, the part that is what I would dare say is a talent of his, is that he is Vulcan. So he has the ability to use some kind of mind meld,
But and that's what's weird, and it's a little undefined, is in the scene with McCoy, where he shows McCoy his own his own deepest, darkest secret, which is that he basically euthanized his father when his father was on his deathbed and begging for the release of the pain and please, you're a doctor, can you please help me? And then McCoy puts a little console into the bed and presses some buttons, and then his father dies. And the great tragedy is a very short time later, a cure was developed for the disease that he has. And then he's like, if I had just given it more time. So that is the traumatic incident. And what's interesting is we kind of look at it and think, oh, this is all happening in a mind meld situation. This is Spock and Kirk witnessing two people probably standing still, having this engagement inside of his head. But then right after that, when Spock is witnessing his own birth, Kirk can see it.
Yeah, there's other
so
spectators.
presumably they could see the bit about McCoy's father as well.
I kind of think that's a part of the illusion.
But he's not mind melding. He's not touching them. He's talking to them, and then these things appear, and everybody in the room can see it.
Yeah, and that's where I do believe that he has this gift. He's been, and think about who he is as a Vulcan.
Sure.
He has been able to tap into
something that other people don't do.
Yeah.
Other Vulcans
Vulcans
they haven't
don't
done
do
it.
this. And he's been able to tap into this incredible
So you think because he has embraced his emotions, it has tapped into a Vulcan ability to use those emotions to show you things. And the Vulcans have forgotten how that works because they don't even go that route. I will ask you this.
Not only that, but Vulcans have the respect and dignity and wherewithal to not abuse that.
Right.
Like it's as if they know, look, don't muck around with what's in there.
Sure.
Because it's insurmountable. It's more powerful than we know.
But what's interesting is it seems to do the job that Vulcans haven't been able to do by suppressing their emotions. You know, that Pon farr is basically the burning of emotions that have, you know, his blood is boiling every 7 years and he needs to get rid of it. And I feel like that's sort of a metaphor for the pinning up of emotions within your own body. And by embracing his emotions, Sybok has unlocked this therapeutic ability to not get violent. Not, you know, you are eliminating the pain and the trauma that you have felt. You know, he comes right out and says, let me share your pain. Let me take that from you. And everyone he does it to then says they feel freer than they've ever felt.
And that part I think is a process and is a result of some kind of emotional release, some kind of validation of the emotional experience that someone is having.
Yeah.
So it's almost as if there's this superb ability, this gift that he has to be able to connect on this deep wavelength and notice that everybody holds this trauma within themselves. And he, like a therapist, is aligning with the person and telling them, you're in a safe place. You're in a relationship. I mean, in some cases, without consent, but you're in this emotional contract with me where if you are willing to deepen your honesty about that trauma, if you're willing to get close to it and observe it and experience it fully, I will be here with you and share that pain with you. I will hold that with you. Yeah. And that's what therapists do. They don't take on the pain themselves. Right. They don't lie to you and say it's going to go away. They don't say, you're never going to think about it ever again. It is indeed a process where there's a sharing and an acknowledgement of the person as a whole person.
Yeah.
Now, when people are then saying, I feel lighter, I feel that like it's been resolved. I'm in that mini enlightenment session. I feel like I believe I now have faith in this person. That is where I'd say the abuse is happening. Where
I want to ask you about that.
He's like taking this ability and there's almost this manipulation of other people. And that's why I don't like this character.
Now this is the part I want to ask you about, because you're using the word abuse, and you have sort of likened him to a cult leader, and in some ways you're not wrong about that. But when I think cults and when I think cult leaders, I think nefarious. I think someone who is doing something in order to enrich themselves,
Yeah.
and literally manipulating other people and being charismatic, but for all the wrong reasons. This guy has bought into it. He's not building an army for his own benefit other
Like
than
his own self-interest.
other than finding enlightenment on Shakari. So he needs the army to take over Paradise City, where the grass is green and the girls are pretty.
Yeah.
The girls are pretty but there is no grass. We see Uhura doing a weird fan dance with leaves of some kind or something. It's so
I don't
bizarre.
know why that happened.
What kind of an HR nightmare is it for Captain Kirk to be like, Uhura, here's what I want you to do. I want you to get naked behind this dune, grab those branches over there,
And do a sexy dance.
Just start doing a sexy
For a
dance and
distraction.
song, so that those guys come over here and we'll take their horses from them. Like, what?
There's
kind
all
of a
sorts
commander.
of different, there's all sorts of ways you could build a distraction without this objectification. It's very heteronormative. There's lots of assumptions we're making about the group of soldiers who are being targeted by the crew. It's an odd choice.
It is an odd choice.
It also doesn't seem like something I've seen her do. I like.
No, but we have seen her do it.
Did we see her do that?
In Star Trek 4, when she puts the little boy in the closet, where she's sort of doing the hey there,
that's
whatever,
right.
and then he's like, "What? What's going on?" And she's like, "Now get in the closet." This.
Right. So seduction.
We have seen her use
Yes,
this, but never to this extreme.
Seduction is one of the weapons that they use to get the job done. It's interesting because it's always her.
Yeah,
it
it's always the
doesn't
woman.
have to be her.
Yeah.
But that's how they choose, or that's what they choose.
But back to my original point, I feel sorry for Sybok in the end. He's not really a villain. He is someone who went looking for something and kind of found it and found that he had been played. And so I think if they had made him the evangelist that Shatner originally wanted to be the villain, I think then we probably would have had a real problem, because you even mentioned Benny Hinn when we were watching. You're like, this is some Benny Hinn stuff when he's like, let me free your pain, and he puts his hand on his forehead and presumably knocks him down to the ground, whatever.
Right. I'm an apostle. I'm an ambassador of God, and
I'm a prophet.
Yeah, I have the ability to release you from your pain.
But those people know what they're doing. They're
taking people's money.
They're taking people's money. They are not using it for good reasons. They are preaching but not practicing. There have been so many of these people who have gone to federal prison because of these tactics.
I thought about that.
But he's not doing these things.
Nexium guy. Oh gosh, why can't I remember his name? Kevin Rainier.
Oh yeah.
Certainly, it was benefiting from the abuse of these people's vulnerabilities. The Manson is another good example of a cult leader who just thrived off the control and power, and I believe he wanted to take lives.
Right.
The
difference, I think, is that Manson.
Well,
I think he had also bought into
this. This is my point. And then you go further along the spectrum to Marshall Applewhite, who was Doe, who led the Hale Bop group, which is all of these are very upsetting instances of cult leadership and indoctrination that results in death. The point I'm making is that there is not one typology. It's not as if all of the cult leaders that we just mentioned or that existed have the same pathological profile. There's some similarities that I'm seeing in I keep wanting to call him Zyrtec.
Sybok.
There's Zyrtec would be a really good Vulcan name, by the way. I'm just putting it out there.
Possibly.
But Sybok does have some similar characteristics and traits that we see in cult leaders. And some of these are pathological. Some of these are bordering on having, delusional ideas. I think that he does have a propensity for power. I think he is trying to kind of use his talent and his skill to control others. I do think he needs to have that ship, right?
But he feels like he's doing it because he builds the army in order to take over Paradise City, in order to put together this mock hostage situation, which lures the Enterprise. The idea is to take over the Enterprise, then go to Shakari. But he's also going to take those people and give them the same,
right. He's not planning on hoarding or taking all the power for himself or being the only one. He wants to share the enlightenment.
And most of these weapons aren't even. They're not the kinds of things. They're not like weapons. They shoot rocks. That his army is carrying. Like the little blasters, because we see the guy load them up in the beginning with the rocks. And
well, I think the point that I'm making is that even if he does believe that he has a connection to a deity and that he has this pathway to get there, he fundamentally, he believes that. He also, like some of these other cult leaders in our history, he's gotten to a place of being very adrift from reality. Like he's not exactly grounded. He's not exactly the most stable person, in that with the combination of this talent, this ability to notice vulnerabilities in other people, and this conviction that he carries, what he's doing is abusive. I fully believe that. What he's doing is, of course, it's illegal. He's breaking all these laws. He's commandeering a ship. There's all these things that move the story forward. But as a person, I hear you say that you have sympathy for him.
Yeah.
And I'm saying you can have sympathy. I have sympathy for Doe, because I truly believe that there was some level of delusion there. Now, did he take it so far? I think he started to believe in some of the things that he was crafting, that he was developing and almost creating as a religion.
Right.
He had gotten in too deep.
Yeah, because we established, or we didn't. They established that the creation of the Hale-Bopp concept was not because he believed that aliens were going to take us. It was for more nefarious. But eventually he bought into his own premise, the power that he had received.
You named it. He bought into his own power, and so that gets it's a collusion. It gets commingled. The power that he's accumulating and experiencing clouds him. It clouds his cognitive abilities, and it becomes bigger than he is.
Well, and that's what happens at the end of this film when Sybok comes face to face with himself, where the godlike being says, "This is who I really am," and it turns out it's you all along. Your hubris has led you here, and that is
and
what
his comeuppance.
Yeah.
So walk me through that, because
he sacrifices himself to fight the demon.
There is a point where I kind of lost track of what was going on.
It does fall apart at the end, which is why I wouldn't call this a perfect Star Trek film. But even watching it, an hour ago, I don't think it's as bad as Star Trek 3. But if you're although they both fall apart around the same time when you enter another planet that begins to fall apart with plastic rocks or foam rocks. So Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and Sybok go down to the planet that they believe is Shakari. They go and wander the desert. It's interesting because Sybok's like, it's exactly how I pictured it. And you're like,
It's kind of unremarkable.
this is not the Eden, although it does look a bit like Vulcan. Like it isn't so dissimilar. Very rocky, tall spires and structures made of rock that, sort of give it a Vulcan flair. But as a human being, you wouldn't confuse it for Eden or Nirvana.
Yeah, it's very dry.
But then this stone rib-like structure forms around them, almost a Stonehenge kind of
You make
experience.
a really good point. How can you take me to Genesis and show that to me, and then take me here, and these characters are like, wow.
But no.
What?
But only Sybok, because because Kirk's sort of looking around like maybe there's nothing here.
Yeah, okay.
And at one point Spock even starts to say like, Sybok, brother, maybe you're wrong, and that's when the world starts to open up and the rib-like structures come up out of the ground and surround them, and then they see a gigantic Oz-like face in front of them who chooses the form of a old white dude with a curly white beard and hair, and he's like, is this the appearance that suits what you expected of a god? And he basically says, congratulations, you're the first people to have gotten here. I will give you the gift of my wisdom, but it is up to you to take that wisdom away from here out into the universe. And to do that, I need to use your starship. And I don't deny people laugh at this line all the time, but I do not deny that without irony, I love this line. Let me just play it here for you.
Excuse me, I'd just like to ask a question. What does God need with a starship?
I love that line, and I love the way Kirk says it, because it is so like, what's going on? Like, why are we here? Why do you need...
How would you? Well, how would a powerful deity need anything from these beings?
Yeah, and the deity says, "Who is this guy?" And Kirk's like, "Don't you know? Aren't you God? Like, don't you know who I am?" Which starts to you start to see the cracks in.
Yeah, the Wizard of Oz of all of this is that, and here's where here's where I believed I understood what was going on. Is this is no God.
Yeah.
This is some being, some person, some guy who is imprisoned on this planet alone and does have insurmountable power, does have the ability to have multiple visages and to kind of like appear.
And to shoot lightning out of his eyes.
Right. So there's, it's like, this does seem like a celestial, but not the one we came for.
Right.
Then when he becomes antagonistic or it reacts and starts to attack them, I do like their response. I think I don't know if it's McCoy or...
He shoots Kirk in the chest with the electricity, shoots Spock in the shoulder with the electricity, and then is about to do the same with McCoy. And McCoy says, I don't believe in a God that abuses people for his own entertainment.
So he begins, his clear-headedness comes back. He's no longer in the mist. He's no longer occluded. Like he sees what's going on. And we do too. We start to realize this is not what they came for. I think what I didn't understand is, so who is this? Is this? You mentioned the first go at this script. Like, where are we? What is going on? Who is he supposed to be?
I mean, I think when he says that he's been imprisoned there for so long, I think he's basically revealing I am an alien being, not so dissimilar from Apollo, who has been stranded in, and it's very possible that the world is him. Like it could be, he comes from the core of the world. It's an answer that we are never given, except that a Klingon bird of prey is able to shoot him and blow him up.
Well, and he starts to take on the face of Sybok.
Yeah.
And so then I'm just like, wait.
But again,
am I to understand so Sybok didn't create him?
No, I think, no. I don't think it's one of those things where he manifested him from a distance, although maybe. But I do think he was basically showing him, I am you. Ultimately, you would become me. You're looking at a mirror of yourself. The grandiosity, the hubris, and I am going to get myself off of this planet using your starship to carry my message. But there is no message.
Right,
he just wants to dominate the universe.
The message? Okay.
And he's using this ideal of a god to lure people in. And Sybok was attuned to that, was lured in, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe some novelization gives a more thorough background. But when you look at just the context of the screenplay and the final edit of the film, there is no explanation exactly as to who this character is.
Okay.
Only that there's a great barrier clearly keeping him inside, and he wants out.
Is it possible that the bird of prey destabilized this being?
Yes.
And got out, and that they're still imprisoned and on.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
I mean, it's very possible that this planet could be ego. Like this planet could simply be a manifestation of a power that is now being locked inside the Great Barrier.
What do you think is and by the way, Sybok sacrifices himself for a moment. It's successful for like a quick second where he's
enough of a distraction.
Yeah, see, that's how you make a distraction. He's able to basically get into the deity's force, like into the I want to call it,
but his
shield.
psyche as well. Like he merges with him by saying, "I see that you're in great pain," similar to the way that he was, in your words, abusing the others by manipulating them and bringing them into his collective. He then looks at this great being and says, "I can see that you are in great pain as well. Share that pain with me. Let me take it from you." And the two of them engage in sort of a shoulder to shoulder wrestling match until he then the beings sort of disappear when a photon torpedo is fired from the Enterprise and it blows them up, and you think, oh, we've beaten him, and the other three try to get off the planet with the shuttlecraft, and they realize that no, he's still there. And right at the moment that Kirk is about to meet his end, all alone on a mountaintop, the Klingon bird of prey comes up behind him, shoots God, quote unquote God, blows him up, beams him on board the bird of prey, and we find out that the Klingon ambassador commandeered the ship.
There's always like a weird Klingon B story going on with all these movies.
Oh yeah, they love Klingons in these movies.
Like, oh, by the way, the Klingon ship that was preying on you, there was an easy out. The commander was basically intercepted by the admiral or whomever, the retired admiral, who's a Klingon and has more authority,
and makes him apologize.
Yeah, it's a little weird, but okay. I think what I liked about that is it was Spock who was shooting. Yeah, well, exactly. It was Spock who was able to make that all happen. And the whole point of that, as I understand it, is your friends are here. Like, you're not alone. And he said that more directly. You're not alone. Your friends are here with you. And that resulted in then a deeper conversation about, we always say we don't have family, but this is it. This is our family.
Yeah.
I do want to talk a little bit more about, I'm going backwards into the group therapy session between Sybok, or among Sybok and Spock, McCoy and Kirk. It's interesting that both Bones and Spock have a moment with Sybok. So Sybok gets to them, basically. So he approaches Bones, and you talked about what manifests from deepening his understanding of what his fears are, or what his trauma is. What comes out is that he feels an intense amount of shame and guilt and sadness about the passing of his father, and that he may have lived longer had he not euthanized him. Mm-hmm. What comes from that is Bones it's almost tapping into one of his deepest fears. His biggest responsibility is to do no harm. He's the doctor. Mm-hmm. You don't harm people. You protect people. You heal them. You are the compassionate one. And
it's precisely why he's freaking out watching his dear friend climb El Cap, because he's useless standing there. Like all he can do is look at him through binoculars.
That helplessness,
and stress out.
Yes. The worst thing that he can experience is helplessness.
Yes.
Well, no, the worst thing he can experience is doing harm.
Yeah.
And so he carries with him this history of, what if I did something I should not have done? What if I did something that prevented my father from experiencing longer life, peace, healing, his own enlightenment? What did I prevent him?
Yeah.
The irony, from having?
The irony is that he says, with all of my abilities as a doctor, I couldn't do anything to help him. And it turns out, by simply not doing anything at all, you could have helped him. And instead, you took action and it killed him. And you knew going in that it was going to kill him. That's the action you chose.
And what I do like about that is, so of course we learned a little bit more about his psychology, but what I do like about that is some of that burden is lifted from him. And it's not, and that piece makes sense to me. It's not because there's this closeness to God. At least that's not how I interpreted that. It's because he finally had a chance to reveal what has held the shame, or what how he holds shame within himself.
Yeah.
And that his friends are there, and this prophet is there, and they're saying, you're human, you make mistakes, we love you anyway. That's kind of what therapy is. Do you have the bravery to talk about the things that no one knows about, that you feel the most shame about, that you carry with you and that you have not processed? Mm-hmm. Let's hold that space together and notice we all survive that. The therapist survives it, you survive it. And in this case, his friends are with him. No wonder the burdensomeness of this shame is lifted. Mm-hmm. He actually gives Sybok a break at that moment. He becomes one of his disciples to some degree. And you can see for the first time, because up to this point we think it's brainwashing, and in fact he even says it sounds like brainwashing to me, until he experiences it for himself. But you would think, if you're brainwashed, it's going to be really, really difficult to reject the person that did it, this cult leader. And in fact, at the end of that scene, he's given an opportunity to go with Sybok to the bridge or stay behind with his companions, and he chooses to stay behind, which is one of those things Sybok has been saying from the beginning, is this is all your choice. I am not forcing you to do anything. I am not, I am not a dictator. Yeah, he's not like Khan. Right. So he gives them these choices. With Spock, I love Spock's reaction to what happens? What we know about them is that they're half brothers. Yeah. So there's a trust there that I think exists. But Sybok wants to have this emotional moment and share Spock's pain. And I love Spock's. Maybe you can play the clip where Spock essentially says, I've got nothing to hide from
Yep.
you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's before he sees his own birth. Yeah. I've got it right here.
Okay.
Take a listen.
Each man's pain is unique.
I hide no pain.
I know you better than that.
Do you?
Spock, don't.
It's all right, Captain. Proceed.
And I just like that Spock's he's grown a lot. He's gone through a lot, and this is Spock's matter of fact expression of his own emotional being by saying, "What do I gain from hiding my emotions from anybody? I mean, I'm an open book."
Yeah.
And I just love the matter of factness about him and his willingness to say, like, do it, like, you know, rattle the emotions from me, like,
and it does.
It's not a challenge. It's basically like, go for it. I'm here.
Right. And I will say, to Sybok's credit, he does rattle those emotions from him. Like, he does show him something that is his deepest fear, which is that as a half human, I am not fully accepted by my father, Sarek, who takes the baby and says he's so human.
I actually disagree with you a little bit. I don't think he's rattled.
No. I mean, Sybok rattles the emotions out. Like, I think
yes.
I think he pulls the fear out. We see
it's
what
so
that
interesting because it's like it's like, you know, where, you know, what is your pain? When does your pain start?
Yeah.
What I love about Spock's example, like the manifestation of Spock's pain, is the day he's born.
Yeah.
You know, like, you've got other examples of some historical, you know, these events, these traumas that people have.
Yeah.
And Spock identifies with emotional pain from the launch. The moment I take my first breath is when I experience emotional pain.
Yeah.
And it's specific, just like you said, it's specific to the rejection of his pure Vulcan father, that he looks human. He sees the humanness of this little baby. And
He does have the adorable little pointed ears, though. He's a big baby, but
he's a little half Vulcan baby. It's heartbreaking and it's heartfelt. There's almost a combination of, like, here's this birth that we see, and it's when Spock comes into the world, and the joy and the innocence of this is broken by this really cold, emotionless statement that his father makes, which is basically like, yes, this is I'm paraphrasing, but what's put into or what's poured into his psychology is, my father accepted me as his son, but has always seen me as an unwanted, a child that does not belong.
Yeah.
And the emotional wisdom in Spock is, let me be very clear, this is when this all started. The childhood rejection that I felt is always going to be a part of my pain. Mm-hmm. And that's the matter of factness that I really like about Spock, because it's like, I'm not going to hide that. That's not a deep secret. In fact, this is a part of who I am. I choose to be in Starfleet. I choose the job of using my abilities and characteristics for good. Yeah. And it doesn't matter to me in the same way that it matters to my father, that I'm half Vulcan, half human. Yeah. And it's so endearing. I sort of like that. And I said too, like, I don't think he's rattled by this in the same way that Bones was. 100%. I think he's just like, yeah, that's a part of me. That's what lives in me. Right.
Because he believes that he says, you know, Spock, McCoy, come with me. Like, you're now part of the group. And Spock's like, no, I'm just staying right here. And he's like, well, why? You've seen your pain. You've come face to face with your greatest fears. And Spock's like, yeah. And I'm still a Starfleet officer, and I'm still gonna be me. This is who I am. And
that's the logic.
That's why I'm saying. That's why I said earlier,
because that's the logic.
And that's why I said earlier that he's the perfect representation for that being, because after death, he is now embracing Because think about it. This is right after he told Sarek, I feel fine. Tell mom I feel fine. And so he is starting to embrace emotion, not to the degree that Sybok has, but he has wrestled with this idea that I am not pure Vulcan. I will never be pure Vulcan. Trying to be is a lie. I can only be me and my authentic self. And I feel like we have reached that great plateau. Like that is Spock saying, yeah, I've got fear. I have emotion. You're not going to do anything to me by revealing it, by outing it to the world.
And the outcome is that he knows he doesn't need an enlightened experience to feel these things. Now, Kirk doesn't have the therapeutic moment.
I do want to play that because I've got that clip because I knew that you would bring this up. Let's take a listen to Kirk's invitation to embrace the pain.
What have you done to my friends?
I've done nothing. This is who they are. Didn't you know that?
No, I didn't.
Now learn something about yourself.
No, I refuse.
Jim, try to be open about this.
About what? That I've made the wrong choices in my life? That I turned left when I should have turned right? I know what my weaknesses are. I don't need Sybok to take me on a tour of them.
If you just unbend and all.
And be brainwashed by this con man?
I was wrong. This con man took away my pain.
Damn it, Bones, you're a doctor. You know that pain and guilt can't be taken away with the wave of a magic wand. They're the things we carry with us, the things that make us who we are. If we lose them, we lose ourselves. I don't want my pain taken away. I need my pain.
What a powerful statement. And I'm dying to know what you think about that.
He's not wrong. So, okay, I'm a little bit torn here. There's some dissonance here because he's not wrong. Let me just say that, of course, everything he says about all of our experiences, even the negative ones, make us who we are, and it's what we carry. Mm-hmm. And our emotional wisdom, our humility, our consciousness, our empathy for other people, so many of our traits and our growth, so much of that comes from hardship and trauma and the specific individual, the idiosyncratic difficulties that we have as a part of us. To take that away, and it makes sense, like it's not as if they're going to disappear, it'll be resolved. So this is where I feel the dissonance. It's true. To take that away would mean you're taking a part of me away. Mm-hmm. You do not have the right to take a part of me that I'm close to and that helps define me and helps me feel that I can be a better person, that I have motivation, that I have drive to do better. Whatever it is that I'm trying to think that Kirk holds true to who he is. Now, all those things could be a really healthy outlook, or all those things could comprise a really healthy outlook. And yet, we know that the last movie was about Kirk experiencing joy and overcoming his grief and being able to connect with a woman and have an intimate relationship. I hope I'm not overreaching there, but a closeness with somebody in the Whale movie, and experience a whole lot of things that make him feel joyous and that he's valued, that he has purpose. The movie before that was entailing a lot of grief for him. Mm-hmm. So we know that when he says that he has a lot of pain, or when he says that his pain is part of him, I mean, the first things that I start to think about are the second and third movie, losing his son, losing his friend, having to retrieve his friend, losing a ship, a lot of professional identity related losses and demotions. So there's a lot that he's been through. And when he says when he rejects the opportunity to work through that pain, it also makes me wonder, he's saying something that's freely wise. And also I wonder, is he not yet ready
Yeah.
to process his most deepest pain? Is this a protective reaction? Is this a defensiveness? Is this a gripping on to trauma because all he knows up till now has been trauma and he hasn't yet worked through overcoming it? And so there's a tragic tone that comes out of it could be multiple things, but I see it as very conscious and very, very, very accurate, and also very tragic.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you if you feel the same way. I feel like because Sybok is using the word fear a lot, where he's like, you've got to face your fear, you have to dive into what you're afraid of. And it's not until the people have embraced their fear and seen what it was and encountered it and defeated it that they then feel light and free. We know, or at least I think we know, based on the dialogue from earlier in the film, that Kirk's greatest fear is dying alone, like is being alone.
Yeah.
He believes that as long as he is by himself, he might die. And so he wants to constantly surround himself with his brothers, the brothers of McCoy and Spock. He even refers to having lost a brother once before, but thankfully that brother came back. I believe that we know what he would have faced. He would have faced this idea of loneliness and dying alone without any partner companionship. Do you feel the same way? Like, is that what and the reason I ask this is he has openly revealed this to his two closest friends.
Right.
Already. Like, he's already been vulnerable to them. He doesn't need Sybok to come in as a third party and pull it from him. He seems to know exactly what his greatest fear is, and he has been wrestling with it his whole life. I feel like, or at least since Star Trek II.
So are you asking me if
that's how you took it? Did you, because it's left with this great mystery of, what would Kirk see?
I know. No, I like that part.
But I think we know.
I like that part of this movie where I'm like, what would he have seen? What would his moment?
Yeah.
What would that have looked like? Would it have been?
But I think he's kind of alluded
something he's
to
already
it.
experienced, or would it have been something that he projects into the future?
Right.
I totally agree. I think he's alluded to it. I can't help but feel like my reaction to this was that he does have a lot of psychache.
Yeah.
That he is in a tremendous amount of pain. Now, is it because his projection is this entire story of Kirk? I must return to my responsibilities. I must return to the ship. I must be the admiral, the captain, the leader, because without this, there's nothingness. Without this, I don't know what my purpose is.
I think it's the button that they have been setting up throughout all these movies where he's an admiral and he's no longer the captain of a starship. He's now an administrative. He's going to die alone in his apartment filled with relics and antiques from a rich history of adventure. But he needs to be in the captain's chair, and he needs to be surrounded by a bridge of people, and he needs to be surrounded by these other things.
And as I get to know him more, I know this isn't narcissism and ego, which is what I thought it was. I think it's more about intimacy. I think this is about the closeness of people he trusts and the enjoyment of what it feels like to rely on other people and for them to rely on you.
Yeah.
What do you think that moment would have looked like in this like dreamscape?
I think it would have been the loss of those that he loves around him. Like I think we would have seen the deaths of his bridge crew. I think we would have seen,
for sure.
And I think it would have been his own doing, his own his own hubris. It would have been him marching the Enterprise into something that they just shouldn't have been involved with. And it might have been very similar to like Wrath of Khan. Like we would have seen a situation like that where Scotty was unable to get the mains online, and Spock goes and sacrifices himself, and everyone else finds themselves dead as well, leaving him all alone with that heartache. I think his greatest fear is being the catalyst for losing everyone around him.
Yeah. It's like a whole montage of things he could have seen.
Yeah, there's something to be said about a crew, because think about it. When you think about the military, you're somewhere for as short as a year, 6 months, whatever, to 3 or 4 years. You're stationed at any given point. You could be transferred, and no one is ever transferred off the Enterprise. Uhura is still, like, no matter how much they get promoted, their job remains the same. Uhura will always be there at communications. Their science officer will always be Spock. He's right back there. Even though Bones tried to retire in the motion picture, they brought him back because they needed a doctor they could trust. Poor Scotty will always be the chief engineer. I mean, these folks have never gone anywhere. Chekhov and Sulu are still the helmsmen of the Enterprise. Now, I'm not going to spoil anything for you right away, but that's about to change going into the next movie. But in low key, if you know the ranks that you're looking at, you can see that someone has been getting promoted every movie, and that was by design. We'll talk about that when we see Star Trek 6, but yeah, so yeah, I think it's interesting that he's managed to keep his family all in one place. No one's ever gone anywhere else. I mean, Scotty was transferred to the Excelsior in Star Trek 3, but then he sabotaged the Excelsior and jumped on board the Enterprise. So, the child that's taken away but finds their way back. So yeah, it's I think that's ultimately what we would have seen. What about you? What did you imagine would have been Kirk's greatest fear?
I had similar thoughts. I think it's meant to be an open book. I think it's intentionally not shown to us. And I can't help but it's weird that for me it's not so much important what that moment would have been for him, or what that scene or what that memory would have been, but it's the reaction or the resistance to letting that out.
Yeah.
That's what
would it have done to him? Everyone else, they all sort of felt freer. They felt like, I feel like having that bottled up inside of him is what keeps him on his toes, and what keeps him so willing to be risky in certain situations, and what gives him his edge. And I feel like we might have seen a completely different Kirk if that pain was suddenly just gone.
Yeah, a lot of times you'll hear therapists say the thing that you fear the most has already happened. And it's somewhat true when we think about folks who have been in periods of grieving, or folks who have had, they experienced life-threatening events, traumatic events, hardships that continue to feel like a burden to them, and they change the events themselves, and their responses to the event changes their worldview. It changes how they think about themselves, how they think about their relationships, how they think about their future.
Yeah.
And a lot of times there's an encouragement to move out of that prison. That's an extreme word for it, but for some people it can feel like a prison. What would it be like for me to be exposed to the vulnerabilities and the chances that these things can happen again? So a lot of times very similar to what we saw with Bones and Spock. The thing that they fear the most, it's something that has already happened. It's the thing that creates the emotional prison for them. And I think for Kirk, he has in some way experienced incredible loss, and in some way has this conviction that that's basically how this is going to end for him. I don't know that he's predicting a joyous celebratory outcome when he retires from Starfleet. And so this great reactivity, this defensiveness, the busyness, the need to climb mountains to keep the adrenaline going, to keep the sensations up, to keep the risk up. A lot of that can be a real distraction from what's going on underneath that.
Yeah. I knew that there would be a lot to talk about with this movie. I guess I can only end this conversation by asking you, what is your current order of the Star Trek films?
Okay.
Do you need a refresher of what they were before?
I think it was 1, 2, 4, 3. Is that how I had them
That
before?
is how you had them before.
So it would be 1, 2, 4, 5, 3.
Okay.
If it weren't for these scenes, I'll say, like, just basically that group therapy scene, if that was not in this movie, it would be bumped to the last ranking.
Sure. But that's sort of the crux of this movie. It is about this.
There's some value to this film.
I agree.
The end of it falls apart. It lost me, but I don't know that I needed anything more from it.
So here is why I won't necessarily blame Shatner or the film as a whole. Very similar to what we're seeing now. This film was made right out of a writer's strike. And that writer's strike bumped into pre-production. And so a lot of things didn't get finished or made, or budgets were dropping, and Paramount was eager to rush it into production. And so I feel like what could have been better, like I look at some of the special effects of this film were not done by ILM because they were busy working on other projects at the time. So it was given to a cheaper, faster production house. And you can see by the end of the movie, they're not necessarily up to par. But ultimately, I don't hate this movie. I'm not going to throw it into the Blu-ray player very often, but I would probably watch it before I watch Star Trek 3 again. Like that movie to me still just feels like the cheapest of the bunch.
That's fair.
And so it is interesting that you 1, 2, 4, 5, 3. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So I've got one more.
You've got one more.
Well, there's 6.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, you've got one more. Plus, the audience doesn't know this, but you and I have discussed. We're going to throw on a bonus movie.
Okay.
Audiences can get ready to listen to us wax on about the beginning of a new generation of Trek crew as the old generation makes their way out. We're going to discuss the 7th film, which is technically Next Gen's first movie.
Great.
And it's called Star Trek Generations. And the reason being, it rounds out the arc of Kirk.
Okay.
So we will add Star Trek 7, known as Generations, to the end of this. So technically you have 2 films left, which means we've got to give folks an opportunity to vote on what we're going to cover once we have captured all 7 films. We are going back to our original poll because those numbers were all so close, we feel like it would be wrong not to give those that came in second and third place. In fact, second, third place were both ties. So we are going to give folks the opportunity to vote on Harley Quinn season 1, which can be seen on Max, and X-Men, the animated series, season 1. And we're going to throw in a dark horse that has not been a part of our polls at this point, but has been recommended by so many people over the last year alone that
which
we
will
thought,
remain a mystery until next time.
oh, you think we should
Yeah.
we should remain? Okay, then we are not going to tell you what that third one is, but be prepared for this could be a game changer if you thought X-Men or Harley Quinn were obvious choices for you. So we'll let you know next time when we talk about Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. Until then, I want to give some thanks to our patrons who have made this all possible. Our new friend, Erin Wenrick, who we've met at a couple of conventions. She came to our panel at SDCC, and then we met her again at Star Trek Las Vegas, or I'm sorry, STLV. Kevin Ortel, our dear friend Todd Stashwick, Hero's Journey Fitness, Frank Moeller, Mark Pepper, Swara Salih, Anthony Carrera, my father, Carl Ward, Eric O'Sullivan, Rachel Acevedo Hoffman, Ruben Gonzalez, and Dr. Girlfriend. Thank you all so much for making these episodes possible with your donations to our monthly Patreon. You can have your name called out by going to patreon.com/Arkham Sessions and joining the $5 tier. Until next time, Drea, why don't you give the folks information on where they can find you online?
You can find me online. My website is drdreapsychology.com, and I am on social media at Arkham Asylum Doc or Dr. Drea Psychology on Instagram and Threads.
You can find me, really the place I hang out the most is Instagram. So you can go to @B_Ward028 on Instagram. You can also find us both at the Arkham Sessions on Instagram. On formerly Twitter, we are at Arkham Sessions. You can come find us on Facebook. Like I said, come follow us on Patreon. And come follow our family over at Fanbase Press. See all of their upcoming comics and their podcasts and their news. They are a fantastic site and a great family to have. Till next time, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Drea Letamendi.
And together we are
The Arkham Sessions.
Good night, Bones. Good night, Jim.
Good night, Spock.
Good night, Doctor.
Good night, Spock.
Good night, Jim.
I don't know. I just don't know.